Hi everyone and welcome to the second season of the UX Time podcast. My name is Svetoslav Netka and I'm a co-host and design lead at Magic Flux, which is a part of the Tech Magic company. My co-host is Alexander Pichtovnikov, a delivery director and a health tech expert at Tech Magic. Today our guest is Scott Johnson, a UX director who worked at Cencora during the last 4 years. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast platforms so you never miss an episode. Additionally, Tech Magic and Magic Flux are organizing the free UX Time Conference 2026, and registration is now open. If you're interested in learning from speakers at some of the largest companies in the world and receiving a certificate of attendance, check out link in the description. Hi Alex, thank you for co-hosting today's episode. And hi Scott, thank you for joining us. Scott, could you share a bit about your journey in design? How did you start? What has the journey been like? And where are you now?
Yeah, thanks again for having me. Really appreciate it. So going way back, I really wasn't sure of my path in college. I was interested in a lot of things, but didn't really have a clear direction. Ultimately, I double majored in marketing and political science, but I also had side quests in percussion performance, history, and public administration. So kind of all over the map. But then right out of college or school, I had some startup experiences that were really kind of pivotal in helping me figure out what I wanted to focus on. In startups, you often have to wear a lot of hats, and I did get those chances. Whether it was fundraising, design, managing dev teams, marketing, keeping the lights on. Whatever was needed, I was exposed to. So not only did those experiences like kind of show me product design and usability, they also taught me how to kind of build from zero and also navigate the extreme ambiguity and uncertainty that often comes with startup life. And while I didn't have anything to show for those startup experiences financially, they definitely like accelerated my knowledge in tech and in business. So like very, very glad I did that and would highly recommend that folks out of college get an experience like that at some point. Eventually, things kind of clicked, and I did realize that I wanted to focus exclusively on design, but I still didn't feel like I had enough credibility or experience. Throughout my 20s, I was staying up really late every night, reading about design, teaching myself front end code, and doing a lot of design challenges, doing startup weekends, things like that, hackathons, those sorts of stuff. I also started a design master's program around this time and joined the health tech company Cerner on a really large and growing UX team. I definitely had a lot of imposter syndrome uh, early on. I was surrounded by a lot of really talented and smart designers that all had, actual design degrees. Several had industrial design or graphic design or architecture backgrounds and had way better illustration skills than I did. So I always kind of felt like I didn't belong or like I had to prove myself. But at the same time, it pushed me to continue to get better and learn. And really being on that team was one of the best things that happened to me career-wise, I think, in terms of being able to learn from awesome peers, work on really complex problems, while also kind of learning the ropes of operating in a huge Fortune 500 company compared with, the single digit startups that I'd come from. So having kind of both ends of the spectrum there, I think was really good for me. Then I had a brief stint as a product manager at Cerner, wound up at Cencora, which is another huge company. It's like a Fortune 10 that no one's ever heard of. So there I built out a research and design team inside of a product org focused exclusively on new product development. It was a really great 4.5 years there. Was extremely fortunate to lead an amazing team. We worked on a lot of very difficult problems, but did a lot of cool stuff there. Unfortunately, just very recently, I was laid off in some org chart musical chairs. a new CEO came in and kind of shook things up, as is pretty common now. I know a lot of the UX industry is kind of experiencing a lot of these issues. So now starting my journey into what comes next, that's been pretty exciting. I think the forced reset, I think will be good. So now on to looking for, a new opportunity to build and lead a team. Particularly excited about, finding a role where I can kind of blend this emerging AI, tech, and design leadership. So that kind of in a nutshell has been my career journey so far.
Thank you, Scott. I have a follow-up question. I think we talked before we started the podcast about, and you kind of touched on this in the beginning as well, that you were still trying to find your path, right? So I think it was political science, then it was marketing, then Master of Design and Management, right?
Mhm.
Which you did not finish, which is specifically highlighted on LinkedIn, which I wanted to be very
Yeah.
unique. Actually, usually people like, they brag about their accomplishments, and you're like, yes, I did not finish this. Can you
Yeah.
maybe expand a little bit on, like, I personally wanted to be quite brave in a way, because not everybody will be so honest about this. Just curious.
Yeah. I think for a couple reasons. One, I had already done so much self-study that when I got into the program, I was like, I kind of like know a lot of this stuff, and that might be a little arrogant or a lot arrogant. But I didn't feel like I was getting what I wanted out of it. I definitely, I'm glad I did it though, or what I did partake in it. I met a lot of really awesome people, had great professors and everything. And so like the best part of it was kind of discussing, industry stuff with peers. So that was really cool. But also around this time, kind of nearing the end of the program, this is when I was also getting more interested into product management and kind of where my career would go next. I was more focused on other things, and so it didn't make sense for me, I don't think, to continue to kind of pursue the degree all that seriously. So, and maybe I should have finished it. I don't know. Um, it probably would have been good to finish it. But yeah, I was focused on other stuff at the time, kind of exploring more into product management. So that's kind of why I ultimately decided not to continue with it.
You had more hands-on experience rather than theoretical, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
also a follow-up, I guess, to that is, did any of the other degrees like political science or marketing came in handy? I remember, the famous story, like Steve Jobs' story about typography, where he used it later on in Macintosh. Did you have like a moment like that where oh yeah, I can use some of these skills in UI UX and in my path?
Oh yeah. So I think the business courses I had in marketing, I think have given me a much better understanding of knowing business and kind of how design, supports the business. I think this is one area where a lot of designers unfortunately don't get a lot of exposure to business acumen or business skills early on through design schooling. And so I think that has definitely helped me be a better kind of strategic partner to business counterparts. And then on the political science side of things, we had a lot of research. So like had to do a lot of business stats and stats through some of the research stuff there. So which has been really helpful, designing whether it's usability studies or user research, interviewing, kind of contextual inquiry kind of stuff. So like it seems like kind of a counterintuitive background, but I think it's actually really helped me in the long run, kind of all over the place, but I think has been, yeah, very helpful.
The famous T-shaped, E-shaped.
Yeah, I've heard that referred to as a broken comb. I think by Jared Spoon or somebody. And I definitely think that's more where I fall into.
Awesome. My next question is, obviously you had such a career and you're still going strong. Maybe you have like one story of a favorite project you delivered, something that from the top of your head. And if it's not only one, maybe you share a couple.
Yeah, a couple, I think, if you don't mind. One going way back. I actually designed one of the first like streaming podcast apps that was released on Android.
Nice.
Unfortunately, that market wouldn't take off until like years later, and we couldn't stick with it due to funding realities. But still really cool to be like early on that scene into what would become a cultural phenomenon. So that was
Mm.
cool. Apart from that, working in healthcare for a while, I think has afforded me a chance to work on a lot of impactful projects that have positively affected the lives of hopefully millions, not just patients, but also healthcare providers. One that stands out here recently is an inventory management product I worked on at Cencora. The problem we were solving was that health systems often struggle with supply chain disruptions and med shortages. And they also don't have great visibility into their inventory. So they're constantly in this reactive mode to keep these critical supplies in stock. For this project, I led some initial research with pharmacy operations leaders at health systems to validate kind of this initial demand. And as the project showed, more and more promise, I transitioned that design and further research work over to one of my product designers and shifted into more of an oversight role. And it was a really good opportunity to coach them through a high visibility project while keeping the work moving forward and everything. The product launched with a small group of pilot customers and grew quickly from there. One customer expanded their usage significantly within that first year, and the product was on track to become a really meaningful revenue driver. So that was really cool. And what made me proud wasn't just like the business outcome, but and solving the problems for customers, but also being able to give that report that opportunity to shine and take on significant responsibility. So that was for me was pretty proud of that.
Scott, it would be really interesting to hear more about your transition from a UX design role to UX manager role.
So kind of as I mentioned earlier, towards the end of my time at Cerner, was looking like what is beyond being a senior UX designer. I was looking to have more impact, and I think this is a really common predicament that senior and lead designers find themselves in. You get to that point in your career where a lot of these senior folks are like, "Hey, give me bigger problems," or "I want to have more influence," or "I want bigger impact around here." You've developed that expertise and the confidence, and also have a little bit of restlessness knowing that you can provide a lot more value at a higher altitude. So that's when I started to explore the product management stuff. I moved into a PM role for a bit, thinking that's where I'm going to scratch that itch. And I think some designers, this would be a great move. I would encourage a lot more senior design folk to explore that more deliberately. But anyway, that ended up not quite being what I was looking for, and had an opportunity to go through my network to go into management. I knew eventually I wanted to take that kind of larger leadership role, so was very motivated to go into that. And right away in that new role, I was like, oh, I really enjoy management. I think this is exactly what I was looking for, helping your team work through challenges or finding creative solutions to design problems is really rewarding for me. In addition to seeing your folks like knock it out of the park and do great, that's really rewarding. So that kind of was how I approached that change, and I think kind of found my sweet spot and where I feel like I belong.
And maybe at this point, do you have any advice for UX designers interested in moving into UX management role?
I think definitely like kind of the token like leadership training, I think is essential. Understanding like more of the human side of things. That's really critical, like how to deliver feedback, how to critique, kind of the relationship building. That's all very important. I think also more on the business side of things as well, whether it's learning budgeting or some really basic accounting. I think understanding pretty high level finance as well, like understanding, ROI calculations, understanding how investments work at your company, and prioritization, I think, is all very critical as well. Those would be the ones that kind of really stand out to me. Recruiting as well, understanding how to go about finding talent and evaluating folks, because that's really hard as well.
On the recruitment topic, actually, I had two questions for you. I was just very curious. Like from based on your experience, what like do you have a favorite question you would ask during like a session? Let's say you'd be, hiring for your team and you'd be looking for like a leadership role. Do you have like a favorite question you would ask someone?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite, but I think two that come to mind. I think it's really important to ask about communication style, and then where they would fall on what I would call like a micromanager slash hands-off continuum. But both of these, I think, get at some key culture fit criteria, particularly knowing like how micromanagey people are. In some roles, you may want that. In others, though, it could be kind of poisonous. Like if you have a really senior, experienced team, you don't want somebody that's going to be pouring over their shoulder and causing some conflict there. And other times, it's just helpful to know how to manage around it. So yeah, I think those two would come to mind, and I think getting clear answers on that stuff is really important.
Hmm. In terms of a skill set, what skill set would you be looking? Because from what I'm hearing, it doesn't always boil down to hard skills necessarily. It's sometimes even more about people skills, right? What
For
is the
for
for
management,
leadership and management? Yeah,
yeah,
UI and I mean UI UX. So obviously there, as I understand, there has to be a certain,
yeah.
hard skill element. But what is the like main soft skill that is important?
Probably going to be a few here, but I'd say like negotiating and
Hmm.
prioritization. You're always going to be working with counterparts across the business around like trade-offs. Like, okay, we can focus here, or we have X amount of bandwidth to deliver this in a certain time, or we can do something else. Like, there's a lot of horse trading that goes on at those levels. And so being able to have those conversations effectively, without prejudice, I think is really important. So that would be a big one. Also, just like being able to manage all of the context switching is another big one. There's a lot on your plate, and there's a lot of fires to put out. Um, so being able to kind of have the time management skills to effectively manage all that chaos is also really critical.
Yeah, that's very, very insightful. Sometimes also I think it's how to say no in a very polite way. Well, we're coming to your point about negotiations, because I would imagine, a PM would be always under so much pressure to deliver. You're always in like very limited time and resources and everything, and you have to kind of be that person, say yes, but no. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's.
no, that's I'm glad you mentioned that too. Like that's also a big part of it. It's like, no, we actually can't do that, what you're asking, or we need to stretch the timeline, or we need additional resources. Being able to have those conversations.
In terms of healthcare, because obviously you started not from there, but you've already been, in healthcare for like quite some time. What were some of the lessons that you've learned while working in UIX in healthcare, especially because it's a very, heavily regulated market?
Mhm.
And I was just curious, how did you adapt? How was it for you?
Yeah, I think one, it takes a while just to learn because it's very difficult working in the field because a lot of designers do not have that clinical expertise. So you have to rely on your clinical counterparts to, translate things or educate you on stuff. So that's one is just kind of being prepared to do the additional work to learn that, or leveraging partners to help you understand things. Another one is probably like that those regulatory constraints and complexity don't have to mean bad UX or aesthetics. I think that's an easy trap to get in. You can definitely still design really elegant experiences, usable experiences within these highly regulated environments, whether it's healthcare, finance, insurance, as long as you understand those rules deeply enough to work with them and not against them. So that would be probably the other one that I would say.
You have more than 10 years of experience in UX field, so it would be interesting to hear your perspective on the future of the UX design role.
That is such a tough question to answer. And I think about this a lot right now, kind of the way things are radically changing with AI. I think several possible paths might emerge. It'll also probably be entirely dependent on a company's org culture, the design influence, and PM sophistication as to what happens at a particular company. I don't think we'll see a single direction take shape, or at least not initially. I do imagine a lot of companies will wait to see what FANG companies do, and then adopt those models eventually. So I think we'll be in this period of like thrash and experimentation, people trying to just figure it out. Anyway, the first one I see is that UXers, product designers will take on more PM responsibilities or may relieve them of some of certain tasks when it's easier to create concepts or get feedback from customers on prototypes or even deploy, real code by non-technical folks. I think design is in a really great position to own more of that product roadmap. So that's one. The next I can see is that in some cases, product managers might squeeze designers out of initial ideation and vision exercises, kind of more boxing design in a little bit into the corner of more the UI and visual polish, kind of maybe going like further back to graphic design. I think design might be entirely purged in some companies if there's too much faith placed on AI. I think this would probably be the worst case scenario for everybody. Having been a PM, that role is so expansive that I don't think PMs should get in the weeds of every single design decision like that, just because you have so much to worry about. But I think in some cases that might happen. Finally, kind of this third lane, I could see designers being pushed more and more into front-end coding as we have the chat bots, things like Copilot, Cursor to kind of help Sherpa designers through the front-end code, or being like code cleanup kind of crew to come in and fix where the AI messed up, implementing design system components or something like that. So those are three scenarios that I think are probably the most obvious to me. Or, there might just be so much inertia that not a lot happens too. It's really hard to say. I do think that the skill set and abilities that product designers possess will still be relevant. They just might be distributed in new ways or accessible to new roles in the future. So if I had, to look into the crystal ball, that's kind of the things that I see.
What are your observations right now, based on what you've already seen internally, maybe externally, speaking with colleagues? Have you noticed a specific trend with UI/UX designers? Are they becoming too dependent and reliant on the AI part? Are they becoming maybe lazy or not really?
Actually, it's been a mixed bag. I've seen some folks that are like super into it and I'm like, yeah, let's use this. And then others who are just like, I hate AI, like very skeptical, very hostile toward it. That's been interesting to see kind of the range of like appetite for it.
And what's your take on this? Like, would you recommend for a fellow designer?
I don't think it's going away. And I think there will also be pressure to lean on it from the business, operating more efficiently, more lean. That's here to stay and probably will only increase. So I think from like a career longevity standpoint, I think designers definitely need to prepare to embrace it. And at the same time, though, I think there are a lot of benefits. We can do a lot more, a lot faster. So I think it's maybe too early to tell what that looks like in a few years. But I think there's also the ability for designers to be more of the builders and have a lot more ownership of the product. And I think that's exciting if you are, enthused about building products and solving problems for customers. So
it's definitely a tool, right, at the end of the
yes.
day. So you have to probably use it, but don't rely too much on it, right? Because I think
a healthy bit of skepticism and understanding the drawbacks or limitations, I think, is still really important too. So, and that's why I think, I've been a kind of early adopter and tinkerer of new design tools for my whole career. And I think it's really valuable to do that because you can see where things are heading. You can get an early window into where you need to shift skill set and continue to learn and upskill yourself.
Are there any conferences that maybe you went that you kind of get some inspiration? I was recently at HLTH in Vegas. That was the big one. There's also Vive. Have you been to any of those, or maybe you visited other conferences? Like, what are your thoughts on them?
I think it depends what you're looking for. Is it upskilling? Is it networking? I think you should definitely go into conferences with a specific reason or session in mind, at least from like a budget standpoint. And maybe this is the manager talking in me here. Like, are you going to get a return on that particular conference? I do think conferences can be fairly hit and miss in my experience. So planning ahead and getting laser focused on what you're looking to get out of it, I think is really important.
Very pragmatic way of putting it. Yes, that's
Yeah,
very
yeah.
smart.
Having said all that, I love learning for the sake of learning. And if, budget wasn't an issue or if you had unlimited time, I'd say, yes, definitely worth it. Visit those conferences if you can.
Your work involves a lot of communication with people. Could you share your top 3 recommendations for giving effective feedback?
First, be direct, be tactful, but direct. If you can provide a safe, compassionate environment with open communication for people, this shouldn't cause any problems. In my experience, fosters respect between parties. So that'd be one. Two, I'd say don't put things off. Rip off band-aids immediately. The harder the convo or feedback, the sooner those issues probably need to be addressed. So that'd be thing two. Last one would, I'd say, like, don't assume anything. Ask questions, understand where people are coming from before taking any action. So, like, I think the combo of those three things kind of lead to a kind of psychologically safe environment, which I think is better for everybody. So I think, yeah, those would be my three.
Just in terms of, again, we touched a little bit on AI and how it's moving in terms of a skill perspective. How do you see it changing also the market, especially the healthcare, because it's becoming more and more regulated, right? So I think the recent one wasn't AI related. In Europe, they had the EU Accessibility Act. I think it was released like in 2025. I know US is more like it's kind of scattered, so it really depends on what state. Like it has different regulations. But do you see changes that might happen there as well that might affect, like, for example, data visualization, where did the patient get the information, etc., like explaining in a very simple way to the end user, like these are my results and this is where we got them from, because healthcare data is so complex, right? And I think that's something that design can actually solve pretty well.
Yeah, I have worked on some projects for some European markets. I'm Though I don't know if I can make any informed, bold claims about Europe specifically. It's hard to say what will, if anything, will happen in the US, where things are kind of a quagmire at the moment. So I don't know if there will be any like big landmark legislation taking place here soon, on that front. But I imagine there will be a lot of appetite to ensure that whatever AI is doing, whatever's happening in the black box is being exposed or accurate. So I can see more of that, more pressure being applied in those areas.
You did mention again that you had again the imposter syndrome, right? So I presume you did a lot of reading, a lot of maybe books and tutorials and like just learning. Is there a recommendation, a book or a source where you found the holy grail? Was there something that you would recommend to any fellow like UX designer, like, hey, like you should read this and this, or you should check this person's podcast or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's definitely cliche, but The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman was kind of one of the first important reads that I had.
Sviat is nodding for those of you because we're without video, but he's nodding.
Another one that I think is less popular is Sketching User Experiences by Bill Buxton. That was one that I think kind of changed my approach to design considerably in terms of the amount of what I would consider like exploration that I do. So and from it I kind of developed a rule of thumb to like create, whether it's 5 to 10 or how many screens or designs for a particular problem before getting to a solution. So basically doing a crap load of exploratory design and tinkering before landing on a direction. So you're doing a lot more kind of play or um, fiddling around with trying to get things work. And I think through that exploration, you get at a much better result rather than just like landing on something initially and trying to force it. Whereas if you aren't precious about your work. You can do a lot of different iterations and quick exploring to get at much better outcomes.
Based on, because what you just mentioned, how do you keep a playful mood, especially in UIX, when healthcare and it's regulated, and designers are very creative. And obviously that kind of falls in your lap, right? Like you're a PM, you're kind of leading a new, like, I don't know, a new design project. How do you keep the culture so, playful and don't kill the creativity, right? Like you still have to operate in a box, right? What's
Yeah,
your approach? What do you do? What's your secret sauce?
part of that is if you create a good team culture that I mean, there's a lot of ceremonies or opportunities to like introduce levity, whether say you're doing like an internal crit or like an internal presentation on upskilling the team on something. Like that's a perfect opportunity to like throw out the stuffiness and like maybe it doesn't have to be on brand. Like it can like introduce your personality, be funny, be creative, try new techniques, try new tools. Like those are really good opportunities to do new stuff and to make the team laugh and remind everybody that like everything we do doesn't have to be totally serious. And those are good opportunities to show other folks on the team like there's multiple ways to do things. So yeah, I think there's a lot of those opportunities are good points to introduce some of that stuff.
So always keep play in mind.
Yeah. One thing I've seen, and I go back and forth on this, is like Easter eggs, like introducing Easter eggs into your designs. I've been admonished for some Easter eggs I didn't see a problem with, but whether it's using the fake dummy data like and names of pop culture references or whatever. I think you can go too far if you're going to use them in usability testing or presentations to stakeholders, then maybe you want to make them more subtle and not beat you over the head with them. But like that's an example of like where you can potentially introduce some of that stuff. And if it's internal and if it's only going to be to your pal on the team, I think that's totally fine and a good way to kind of uplift the team and the culture.
Nice. That's awesome. Last one for me. Again, thank you so much for all those kind of nuggets of wisdom. Really kind of just interesting listening to you, Scott. Last one. Did you have during your career, maybe you did, maybe not, like a mentor or somebody that you kind of took inspiration from? It can be like in again, it can be online, it can be offline. Maybe it's just somebody you like listening to, or actually maybe you had somebody physically which you could approach and say, hey, I'm stuck, I'm in a challenge, and like, can you help me out? Like, you had
Yeah.
somebody like that.
Yeah. A couple come to mind. One, an actual mentor. I had a manager during my time at Cerner, who probably did the most to teach me about like the human side of management. And whenever I have like a hard management or personnel challenge, I always ask myself, what would they do in that situation? And that's kind of been my like guiding management principle. Because whatever outcome like it would be a decision that was like considered and respectful and empathetic, and so that was really like important for my management career, I would say. Just in general inspiration, big fan of Raymond Loewy, who made all kinds of amazing designs across wildly different domains, and I have kind of always aspired to be that versatile and like I'm not just an interface designer is kind of my has always been my sentiment. Like I can do more stuff than just moving rectangles around. So I think he's also a great example. if you know the fundamentals of design, you can be valuable in any domain. And I've like played around with 3D design, like typography, illustration, like animation. So like once you have exposure to a lot of different things and have the like core skill set, you can be valuable in any kind of design domain. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I think also sometimes it comes down to an element of luck, finding that mentor, finding that
Yeah.
right person. Because I know so many people as well that they had to make a lot of mistakes by themselves,
Yeah.
and then they're like, oh, like lucky you had somebody who had to teach you, and now I had to teach this all by myself. But yeah,
Yeah.
that indeed is true. Having somebody who can help you, support you, or a community, around you, that's also really important.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
That was the last one. Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for insightful notes. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.